Welcome to Idaho Fishing Game's Hook and Bulletin podcast. I'm your host, TJ Ross from Idaho's Panhandle Region, standing in for Connor J. Lease on this special episode featuring two of Fishing Game's regional fishery managers, Andy Dux and Joe DuPont. In this episode, Andy and Joe will talk about how they make decisions when it comes to fishing seasons and rules. So without further ado, let's get rolling. Maybe this is what you can do in retirement. I'd listen to your podcast, man.
Would you?
Yeah, come on. Musings of Joe DuPont. All right, so welcome Andy and Joe to the podcast. Thank you guys for joining us today. Super stoked to have you guys here.
Yeah. It's nice to be here. Never done one of these before, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Good deal. It's my first one too, so it's our all three of us. It's our debut. Big day. So before we jump in, we got a lot to talk about today, and some really good stuff to talk about today. But I kind of want to give the listeners an opportunity to get to know each of you. So to do that, why don't you tell us what you do for fun?
All right. Well, I'll start off. For me, I would say about half of my free time I probably plan around fishing and hunting. In fact, I do it so much that I got to be careful. I get in trouble with my wife if I don't start planning other things. And it can be a big problem. I live in Lewiston, and Lewiston, there's something good revolving around fishing or hunting going year-round. And, it goes from steelhead fishing to turkey hunting to sturgeon fishing to chinook fishing to elk hunting to chukar hunting. So it's nonstop. And, that's my passion. That's what I like to do.
Good deal. Sounds like you got a pretty patient wife.
I do. She joins me a lot of the time, which is great. It makes it even more. So, in fact, sometimes she's going, hey, let's go sturgeon fish. Let's go up the river. So it just makes it all the better.
Very nice. Very nice.
Well, yeah, much like Joe, I've got probably too many hobbies, but an awful lot of it does revolve around hunting and fishing. And, the blessing and the curse of living in Idaho is that we have all these great opportunities to do those things. And it's a lot of fun, and have a lot of great memories doing those types of activities. And at the same time, you have to be careful not to get yourself too caught up in it and not paying attention to some of your other responsibilities. But certainly a big part of my life is hunting and fishing. Yeah,
I'm guessing a lot of our listeners can resonate with what you guys are saying. Just as I can, it's hard to choose what you want to do in a state like Idaho when you're a sportsman. There's a lot to choose from. So obviously sounds like you're both super passionate about hunting and fishing, like many fishing game staff are. I guess tell us, what role did that passion play for you guys in working for the department, working for Fishing Game?
Yeah, I guess I can start there. I, for some reason, knew from an early age that this was the type of work I wanted to do. I was raised in Idaho in a family that spent a lot of time doing different outdoor activities, and hunting and fishing were part of that, and also spent a lot of time doing those activities, especially with my dad, and he had very much a kind of conservation mindset as well. And so I just was kind of drawn into the types of work that folks in the natural resource field do, and Fish and Game was very visible to me growing up, having grown up in Idaho. And probably from the time I was in junior high or high school, I kind of had in the back of my head that I wanted to do something like this as a profession once I learned there were jobs where you could focus on that.
That's cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, for me, I would say it was a little different. Although I was always in the outdoor scene with my family when I was younger. Originally, I was thinking, hey, I want to be a doctor or a vet. I really didn't even put a lot of thought into what a fish biologist did, or I really didn't even know any. But it just happened to be by chance one summer there's this big job fair, and I applied for a whole bunch of jobs, and one or two of them were with Fish and Game. Didn't even think about it. All of a sudden, I don't know, a few weeks later, somebody called me up from Fish and Game and said, you want a job? And I said, man, that sounds like fun. Sure. And so it was, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was what I was passionate about. I never even really thought about doing something that I'd almost do for free at times. And after 2 years of Fish and Game, I knew this is what I wanted to do. And my wife has asked me multiple times, knowing what you know now and how much less you make than if you were a doctor or something, do you regret your decision? And it's like, heck no. I mean, some of the times when you go to work, it's like play. You know how they say sometimes a a bad day of fishing beats a good day at work. Well, I can tell you a good day at work here sometimes is fishing. So,
Although not as often as many of our listeners might
that
sometimes
is
think.
true. We're at the desk quite a bit.
That's good, guys. Thanks for sharing all that. All right, so I'm going to ask a question that I think probably a lot of people in the public wonder about. And this is with many of the titles of our different staff, but you guys are both regional fishery managers. What does that mean? Like, what do you do for Fish and Game?
Well, we oversee the fisheries management program in a geographic portion of the state. So there's 8 of us, and in those various different regions, we oversee the management programs, and that varies a lot. We have staff that are doing population monitoring, conducting research projects, so things that kind of relate to the fish science. And at the same time, we're also engaging with anglers and dealing a lot with the human element of recreational angling and kind of all those pieces that we put together and ultimately to advance the Fish and Game mission. And a lot of times, simply put, we just tell people our job is to help make fishing better.
I would add that as the manager, we kind of supervise the staff. I think underneath me I have 5. Andy might have something similar to that. And so when Andy was mentioning that, we're helping make fishing better, from the manager's standpoint, we're kind of working with our staff to make sure that they're going in the ground to study certain things that we might have questions on, or monitoring harvest, or putting access on the ground. We then kind of use all that information to help make decisions. For some of the decisions that we commonly make that the public are aware of, or setting fishing regulations. For our Chinook fisheries that we have in the Clearwater, I use the decisions on deciding when to close fisheries or when to change them. Or where to put money. We'll work with other agencies based on all this information that's collected. So yeah, we're kind of working with the people that are doing all the stuff on the ground, and we use that information to make a lot of good decisions. So.
Well, then ultimately, we're making those recommendations to the Fish and Game Commission as well. So the buck doesn't stop with us, but we're working to move that information to the commission so they can make those decisions.
Yep. Super helpful. I'm guessing many of our listeners will find that helpful as well. All right. So I'm gonna pitch a question to you guys that I actually ask my kids pretty often. Oftentimes when we're sitting around the dinner table, end of the day, I'll ask them, tell me what a thorn is for you today, and tell me what a rose is for you today. So a thorn and a rose. Meaning, when you guys think about your jobs and what you do for a living, what are some roses, some things that you really enjoy about what you do? And then what are some thorns, some aspects of the job that you might find particularly, frustrating, challenging, difficult, whatever it is? So maybe think about that. I don't care which one of you goes first, but think about some thorns and roses.
Well, I'll start off with the rose. I think one of the reasons a lot of us go into this profession is we're passionate about the resource. And being fisheries biologists before we became here, we love getting out in the field, studying fish, seeing what's going on. And so some of the roses, I would say for me, have been some of the really fascinating studies we've done. So for example, I've been involved in a sturgeon research in Hell's Canyon, which means I have to go drive jet boats up, catch big sturgeon, see how big they are, how fast they're growing, why they're not surviving. So, those are some of the really fascinating rose type things. Those are the things that I would do for free. I think some people would actually pay to do some of the cool things we do along that line. So there's many different examples. I'm sure Andy will probably share some of those with you. As far as the thorns go, this one's kind of a mix because I really enjoy one side of it, but sometimes not the other. And I do enjoy working with the public, understanding what they like and trying to get it for them. But at times, you can't always make somebody happy, especially when there's diversity of opinions out there. And to be frank, I get some pretty nasty hate mail at times, and that's never fun dealing with those kind of things. Sometimes you can help people understand the decisions you make, and sometimes they're pretty closed-minded, and that can make your job pretty tough at times when people at times say, you should get a new job, or so can't wait till you retire, things like that. But fortunately, I would say that's not a very common thing. Most people are very appreciative of what we do. So,
Yeah, that's good, man. I mean,
Yeah.
it's funny you say that because even in talking with, I said I asked my kids this question. Oftentimes, the rose and the thorn can be the same thing, which is kind of what you got at, right? Like,
Yep.
it's one of the most enjoyable parts of your job, working with the public and trying to provide what they want, but it can also be one of the most frustrating and challenging and sometimes deflating. It's kind of what you're getting at.
Yep.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I'd certainly echo that. I mean, part of what drives most of us into these manager jobs is more than just the interest in fish science, fish biology, but the interest in working with anglers and some of the challenges that come with that. But at times, yeah, it certainly can make you pull your hair out. And most anglers are super awesome to work with, and that's definitely a highlight. But there are times dealing with controversial issues or some people in particular just kind of hard to work with. So that can be a challenge. But I guess I would also add for me, just in terms of roses, we just have really diverse jobs, which I think is fun. I mean, we're bouncing around. We don't necessarily get to focus our attention on one thing for long, but on a given day, I can come into the office and I might take a phone call from somebody about fishing on the St. Joe in the morning. And later that day, I might be in a meeting about, something to do with the Lake Pondere fishery. And in between, it might be dealing with, a conversation with a researcher down at the university talking about some cool research project, and the list goes on. But you ping pong around a lot, and it's hard to get bored, especially when we're, our challenge is working with these really awesome resources, and we get to work with a lot of really talented people as well on our staff and staff from some of our partner agencies and whatnot.
It's really good. So for you though, you would share the same thorn that Joe mentioned.
I would, and I guess I'd add one to it, which is I think we're often limited in what we can do, and I think that frustrates us at times because we always want to do the best we can for the resource and provide an opportunity, but we have limitations. Sometimes that's just how much staff time we can allot to something, or what maybe our funding is going to allow us to deal with, or more often it's just biological challenges too. A lot of things that anglers want out of a fish population, sometimes environmental conditions are driving that more than any lever that we can pull. Or, a big thing we deal with in fisheries management is things like introduced species that, whether they're put on the ground intentionally or unintentionally, really change the game for, management of different fish populations. So those things can be pretty frustrating at times.
It's all good. That's good stuff. All right, so I've got a question here that I, for one, hear often from the public. I think you guys probably do as well. But it's a sentiment that, that Fish and Game doesn't listen. Picture this: someone sitting in front of you comes into your office, calls you on the phone, and says, you guys don't actually listen. I come to the meetings, I submit public comment, I talk to biologists, I do all the things, and nothing ever changes. You guys aren't listening. Your minds were already made up. The whole public comment thing is just a formality. So I want to pitch that out. Maybe you guys have heard that, maybe you haven't, but how would you respond to that?
Well, I'll start out. I can tell you when I first became a fisheries manager, so that was back in 2008, I heard that quite a bit. And so I myself, and I think most managers, put a lot of effort in working with the public so they understand what's happening, understand why we make decisions the way we do. And I did the same thing. Early on, I kind of got beat up a bunch that I wasn't listening to people, and I made a concerted effort to reach out and help people understand. And now that people that go to my meetings, they recognize that we are listening as much as we can and making big changes at times based on what they need or want. And so when I hear somebody that says you're not listening to me, I try to understand what their point of view is, what the issue might be, and then explain, why we may not have listened to them. And so many times when we ask the public, hey, what limit would you like for some fish? And maybe some people say, give me a 2-fish limit, and others say, give me a 1-fish limit. And maybe it's only 55% want one way and 45% want the other. I asked the person, what would you do if 55% of the people said they wanted something? Would you do that one or the other one? And they start thinking about it. And I said, so does that mean I didn't listen to the other 45%? And they start getting it. Most do. The vast majority do. Because I have public meetings every year, most of the people understand that. But even last year, I asked a bunch of people why they weren't coming to meetings, and a few of them actually said, "Oh, because you don't listen to us." So it's still frustrating. We are all listening. You just can't do everything everybody wants. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's a constant balancing act. There's a lot of different things that we're trying to kind of bring together to find a solution that's the best for the most people. And people have varying values. I mean, all over the map in many cases for a particular fishery. People have very different ideas of what they want. And at the same time, we're also charged with doing things like managing for a sustainable fishery into the future. So not what's best for angling today, if that's ultimately going to lead to a fishery collapse down the road, but how do we do that in a way that it's going to provide good angling into the future? And at the same time, we're charged with other things like conservation of native fish species, for example. And so all these decisions have a lot of different layers to them with all these different values that people bring to the table. And it's a real challenge to try to sort through that. And I think a lot of times when you hear people say that we aren't listening, sometimes that just means that they may not have gotten what they wanted. But that doesn't mean that, like Joe said, that we haven't listened or that a lot of other people aren't getting what they want. It's just, they're complex decisions to make in many cases.
Yeah. So I mean, what I'm hearing you guys say is it's a balancing act. I mean, you think about the spectrum of people who have a desire on any given fishery topic. It's a spectrum. There's people at one end and at the far other who desire completely different things, and you're hearing from all of them, right? And you're having to try to weigh all of that information and make the most informed decision that you can, knowing that you literally can't make everybody happy.
Yeah. And I'll add that what Andy brought up a good point. Sometimes we have to make a decision because, let's say, a population is going down. And if we don't change, we're not going to meet our mission, which is preserve, protect, and perpetuate. And so we'll make a change. And sometimes the vast majority of the public says we don't want it. And unfortunately, in those cases, I guess it's upon us to explain, hey, I know you don't want this, but this is what we have to do for these reasons. And so those can often be very tough situations when we're actually not making a decision what the majority of the people want, but it's what needs to be done.
I think there can be a tendency too that in instances where we get a lot of feedback from folks and it results in a change, maybe that just doesn't get as much notice as the times when, things happen that a lot of people don't like, and those are the ones that maybe stick with some people more than others. And I don't know, maybe an example I can give, this is a really broad one that might relate to a lot of people, and it's not new. It's something that we've been working on for 15 years, probably since about the time you started in your position, Joe. Is we heard from a lot of people that they wanted simpler fishing regulations and rules, and so they didn't want to pick up our booklet and have all this complexity in there to try to figure out how many fish can I keep, or what are the methods it take, all these different things. And so there's a pretty concerted effort about 15 years ago to simplify our fishing regulations, and that's been something we've continued to work on since then. And there's still a lot there, admittedly, to try to sort through if you're an angler, but I can tell you from looking at what a lot of other states have, we're in pretty good shape that way, and we've made a concerted effort to listen to that feedback and try to make things at least as easy as we can for anglers to understand, those rules before they go fishing.
I would say another thing that I think all the managers are doing a pretty good job nowadays on is a lot of times people will look in the regulations and, hey, they changed. Why did they change? And if people take the time and go on our website and look on our blog or news releases, typically we'll always say, hey, got a new change here, and here is why. It could be a biological reason we had to do it, or it could be more of a social thing. Hey, most of the people wanted this. And so we try to let people know not only there is a change, but why. And so maybe that hopefully will help those people who say you're not listening to us understand why decisions are made.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah.
And you brought up something that I want to chase down a little bit, the biological and the social piece. Like to dive into that a little bit when we're talking about how you guys make decisions and biological considerations, social considerations, how those two fit together. Is there a priority? Like what does that look like for each of you?
Well, I would say biological probably comes first because our mission is to preserve, protect, and perpetuate. So if a population is spiraling down, then we got to do something to make sure basically they don't get listed under Endangered Species Act or worse, go extinct. So we'll make decisions on, I think, that level first. But let's say that, hey, this population is pretty good. Then we have a lot of flexibility that we can work with the public on. Hey, do you want big fish or do you want lots of fish? Do you care if they're small? Those kind of things. And those are then we can it gets fun where we start working with the public, trying to see what is it you really want. And they might say, hey, we'd rather not harvest many fish, but we want them big. And so then we can then structure our regulations to help create that. And so, yeah, it is a mix. The fun part is when we're not too worried about a population, and we do have a lot of flexibility to work with the public.
The other thing I'd add to that is there's times when I think folks might get frustrated because we maybe don't make regulation change that they think is important, but we're also focused on trying to implement regulations that have outcomes. And although harvest of fish and many times is a driving factor in a population, anglers might be surprised that like more often than not, that's actually not the limiting factor for that population. So it doesn't often do us good to make a regulation change if that's not the limiting factor for that population. It may be some environmental factor or something different. And we don't want to get in the business of just putting regulations on the books because they feel good or a regulation that might set false expectations with anglers that's going to change things in a fishery when it might be something different.
It's a good clarification.
Yeah, that's a great point, Andy. And so I would say overall our goal is not to add more restrictions especially when they don't make a difference, because the more restrictions you add, it just limits opportunity out there. Not everybody likes to fish the same way or same places. So if there aren't needs for that, ideally we don't want to make fishing opportunity more restrictive. So
Sure. Okay. All right. So when it comes to how people give you guys feedback, you're getting calls, you're getting emails, people stopping in the office, people attending public meetings. What's helpful? Like when you think of how can someone meaningfully, productively provide feedback to you on what they want and what their experiences are, what would you recommend? How would you recommend people go about doing that?
Well, I think the most important part is we just need people to engage. If we don't hear what's on your mind, it's hard for us to listen, right? And so I think a lot of us do this with various things in our lives, but it's easy to just kind of grumble to your buddy about something or whatever. Maybe you're out fishing and you're dissatisfied with something, and maybe you tell whoever you're fishing with that day or whatnot, but you don't actually give us a call or send us an email or come to a public meeting. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can engage with us, and we try to provide as many of those opportunities as possible, and we need to hear from you simply. And you'll hear us often say we're always scoping, and by that we mean we're always taking your input, not just during the formal windows when we're maybe asking for public comment on fishing regulations or fisheries management plan or whatever it might be, but we're very accessible. I mean, I know there's a lot of places anymore you call and you just go to some, call center somewhere, but you don't get that at Fish and Game. And if you call Joe or you call me or you call our staff, you're going to get a call back, and it usually doesn't take that long. I mean, we're not always able to call you back the same day, but we're responsive and we like talking to folks, and we value what's on your mind.
yeah, I would 100% agree with Andy. There's a good way to get your message across, and there's a bad way. The good way is letting us know. The bad way is not. And sometimes it doesn't even have to be that constructive, and we'll still listen to you. But I can tell you for the way we operate in the Clearwater region, and I think most people operate this way, is that we keep track of every time somebody gives us suggestions or recommendations. We keep track of it. You don't even have to tell me. You can tell people I supervise, and then they'll feed the information to me. You can even tell our temporaries, and it always comes back to us. And if we hear something consistently, then often when we have a public meeting or some time when we're trying to make an important decision, we like to gather a broader perspective from the public, and we'll let them know, hey, we've been hearing this a lot from people out there. What do the rest of you think? So we usually try to take it back to the broader public before we make decisions, because not everybody thinks the same way. But not always. I've had times when one person told me something, you should do this, and it made so much sense that I recommended it to the commission, and it became a new season or limits. So just, make the effort. Come talk to us. So
The other thing I would add to that is just that there are times when there might be a majority of anglers that want to see something out of a particular fishery, but they just don't really engage with us, and we hear from a vocal minority. And at some point, like, we have to make decisions based on the information we're receiving and what we're hearing. And if there's a lot of people out there that want something and they're not doing a good job of letting us know, that might not, work out in the way that they want, even though they might be in the majority. So it's just important for us to hear from folks.
yeah, I would say that multiple times I've had people call me up asking me, why did you make the decision you did? And I explain the whole process and went to public meetings and this number of people. I said, did you get involved? And almost always, no. I said, well, how come? That sounds like it's important to you. Well, I guess I didn't really think about it. And then they start talking. So if I brought 10 friends with me and we all had the same opinion, I said, if you really believe strongly in something, the way to get it to happen the most is to bring all your friends and have them also speak up too. So, Andy, I wouldn't be surprised if there's times when maybe we passed something or that the minority of people liked, but they are the ones that showed up and voiced. And so if you don't come, we can't hear you.
And along those lines, I guess I would encourage people to don't just talk and tell us what's on your mind, but listen too. Listen to what others are saying in the room at a public meeting. Try to appreciate where they're coming from if they have a different mindset than you do. Try to understand maybe the biological information we're sharing with folks that has to be considered when maybe different regulations are being considered or other issues. Because as we talked about earlier, there's a lot of different pieces to the puzzle, and trying to land on a solution that's best for everybody. It's helpful if the people that are in the room are kind of aware of all those constraints.
Yeah, I would add to that I know it's more difficult to come to our public meetings. It takes time to travel. Often the meetings can last a couple hours. It's a lot easier just to call. But I encourage people, if they can, to come to public meetings, because like Andy said, it's in these public meetings we'll present a bunch of information. We'll talk back and forth with people about questions or concerns or confusions they have, and we can work that out. And so when these people that attend the meeting finally come to the point where they make a decision, they're much more informed than those that don't. And to tell you the truth, let's say we gathered public opinion from public meetings and online, through emails or whatever, and let's say that there was kind of a split. People that attended public meetings mostly wanted this, and the people online wanted something different. And tell you the truth, if that was the case, and I've had it happen at least once, we usually go with what the public meeting people said, because they understand more, just to be frank. So if you really want to make sure you're heard, come to the public meetings. Not only will you understand us more, we'll understand you more.
That's super helpful, guys. Yeah. Honestly, I got to think that people listening to this, if I put myself in their shoes, the thought of calling Fish and Game and wanting to talk to a biologist or a manager to voice frustrations, concerns, ideas, whatever, might be a bit daunting, right? I could see that. And the overwhelming, resounding thing I'm hearing from you guys is that's what you want to be. You want to be accessible. You want people to engage. Like you both said, that's the first step, is just hearing from folks. Obviously, the public meeting context that you just mentioned, Joe, super important, because it's a sharing back and forth of the things that we have learned and we can share with the public, and then hearing their perspectives and having a conversation about it. But at the end of the day, for people just to engage. Otherwise, we may not know what the conversations are and what people are wanting.
Yeah, and I think for folks too, you'll often learn a lot in those interactions, whether it's talking to us or our staff or just hearing from other members of the public that might be at a meeting or whatnot. I know something that I find pretty satisfying, Joe. I'm sure you deal with this a lot too. You might get a phone call and somebody is just wound up and they're hot about something. And I would say more often than not, by the time you get off the phone with somebody like that, they've generally they may not have changed their viewpoint on something, but they've really kind of de-escalated a bit once they've kind of heard some of the information that maybe they didn't know before and have just simply had a conversation. And the more respectful, I guess, you can be when you engage with us, the easier that's going to be. So I encourage that as well. But I think just having conversations goes a long ways.
Yeah, and I'd also say it's not just the people talking to us learning from us. We learn from them. I mean, there's many times I've been in a conversation with somebody and I'll start asking questions about where they were, what they saw, how many they caught, or how they're fishing. And I'm just like, I didn't know that. And it helps, that kind of information helps us make better decisions. So we learn from each other when we engage.
Absolutely.
Super good. Okay, so appreciate all of that from both of you. So another question for you. I want both of you to think about your time working. Joe, you working in the Clearwater region, Andy in the Panhandle. And just think of maybe some of the things one or two of the things that you're most proud of in your time as fishery manager. Maybe some of the biggest wins that you can think of in your region for fishermen, for fish, whatever it may be.
All right, I'll start. One is kind of something that people might not think about, but as a manager, we're involved in a lot of things like we've talked about. And one of the things early on I got involved with is somebody donated a bunch of property to us and wanted us to build a reservoir on it. And so I worked with a team of people, and people had actually worked on this before me, but I had the great fortune of being the closer, I guess, in this case. And we worked with the team of people, and we ended up building this reservoir. It's called Dale Reservoir. It's up kind of by Weippe, Idaho. And so now we have this, because of this team that we worked with, and bringing in all these different funding sources, we now have a reservoir that's there pretty much, for the next 100 years. It's 55 acres, has a beautiful campground around it. The campground now is full all summer long, and so I occasionally go there with my family, and it just makes me really proud to say, hey, I was involved in this, and this is something that's going to be around for a long time. So I guess the other thing very different thing that I'm proud about is, when I first became a manager, I probably didn't do a great job of communicating with the public. This is what we're talking about, and it dawned on me that, hey, if you want to be a good manager, you got to be a good communicator. You got to understand what the public wants. They have to understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, why it's meaningful to them. And so I started doing these weekly updates, and I'd email the public out. And it started out, when my first emails was to 100 different people. And the next year it was to over 200. Then it was over 400. Now I have an email list that's almost 2,000 people. So my ability to communicate back and forth has just grown exponentially from when I first start. And I think people now understand why we make decisions the way we do, the condition of our fisheries. They understand when there's concerns, and I understand a lot more from them because I'm emailing. So people they're emailing back, and so it's not just emails now. Now it's blogs and news releases. So we're just doing all kinds of new things, and I'm proud that I went from a fledgling manager not really understanding it to one now who's fully invested in it, and I think there's a much better interaction because of it.
It's awesome. Both of those are fantastic. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, and I guess for me, it's hard not to cite the Lake Pend Oreille fishery recovery. It's been well publicized. A lot of folks maybe have heard about that. But when I got here, we were kind of in the low point of having a collapsed kokanee population, increasing lake trout population. Angling was generally, not very good out there, especially compared to what the fishery had become famous for in decades prior. And to be here now, and all the folks that have contributed to that fishery recovery, all the predator management we've done out there, working with anglers to be part of the solution. I mean, really, it kind of has all the elements of what you really want to work on as a fishery manager. Really cool fishery science challenges, all of the recreational angling and angler engagement components. And here we are now, and I would argue it's the best it's ever been. Just not only because we have what right now is the world's best trophy rainbow fishery, but we also have native fish that are doing well there. We have a more diverse fishery than we've ever had because of introduced species that folks can fish for, like smallmouth bass and walleye and northern pike, some of which we're managing against, but they're still out there and providing opportunity to people. And it's just been really satisfying to see. When I got here, you could go out on the lake and it would be pretty quiet out there on a weekend without a lot of boats out fishing, and it's a very different scene now, and that's pretty satisfying.
It's great, man.
Yeah, that was not an easy road either. There's a lot of time, even within Fishing Game doubters. I have to tip my hat to you. That's impressive. So.
Well, that's a whole lot more than me. I just have been fortunate to be part of it, but it's been definitely a thing that as a department we're proud of.
Yeah.
All right, so about to wrap this thing up. So for people listening, if they want to get in touch with you or any of your staff, how do they do that?
Well, it's pretty easy. You just call our office phone number. In fact, if you call the Clearwater Region's phone number, 208-799-5010, somebody will answer. You don't go to a calling machine or, push number 1 if you want to talk to Joe DuPont. Somebody will answer it, and you just say, hey, I want to talk to Joe, or you just want to talk to somebody about fish. They'll find somebody for you. There's almost always somebody in the office who will talk with you and work out whatever it is that's on your mind. You can email us too. We all have the same emails, first name, last name, and then the rest is the same. So it's easy to just email us, and we're all good at responding. Those are probably the easiest way. Most of us are also on the river, so if you see us, stop by, say hi. We love chatting with you.
Yeah, same thing here. I mean, just Panhandle Regional Office is the easy button on that, and like Joe said, same email format for me and all of our staff up here. We're pretty accessible.
Right on. Hey, well, got something, Joe?
I was just going to say, you'll find that if you call us, we like chatting with fellow anglers, and so please do so. We look forward to it. Well,
everybody, you heard him say it. Give him a call. If you got questions, you want to talk, call them up, ask for Joe, ask for Andy, ask for any of their staff. Hey, I want to thank both of you guys for taking the time to do this and just sharing your thoughts on being a regional fishery manager, the good, the bad, the ugly, the roses and the thorns. And to our audience listening today, thank you guys for listening to Fishing Game's Hook and Bulletin podcast. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Hope you walked away with some good information and learned something new today. Thanks.